whatever twists and turns were in front of us, we were able to navigate together. It was kind of cool to have some of those conversations. They're difficult. Some of them were really difficult, but I think it was great.
Hello and welcome to the Wellness Dojo podcast, where we bring real solutions to real health and wellness problems. Today, I'm excited to have former NHL goaltender Kelly Hrudey and his daughter Kaitlin on the show. We talk about Kaitlin's company, More Good Days, and also the impact of mental health issues can have on families. This was a great conversation. I'm excited for you to hear it, so let's get into it. Hello, Wellness Ninjas, and welcome back to another episode of the Wellness Dojo podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Craik. Very excited to have my guests with me today. First of all, we've got Kelly Hrudey, former NHL goaltender. He played 677 games, if I'm not mistaken, stopped over 20,000 pucks in his career, and had a highlight career saves of, 73 saves in one game?
Yep.
Kelly now takes his passion to broadcasting and analyzing with CBC and Sportsnet, as well as advocating for important causes like mental health. And we're also joined by Kelly's daughter, Kaitlin, who runs the company More Good Days, which is in support of Canadian suicide prevention services and Canadian mental health organizations. Super important conversation we're about to have. Really excited to have you guys here. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Kyle.
And also thank you for the facts about my dad in the intro. Those are all facts I had no idea about, so I'm learning too.
That's hilarious.
You know, I try and do good intros, and then it never comes out as good as I want it to. So as long as I got the facts correct in there, then
I'd have no idea. Sounded great though.
So Kyle, before we get started, we have three daughters, and Jessica, Megan, and Kaitlin. And when we moved to San Jose, when we left LA, the only way we could get to Kaitlin and Megan to come to the hockey games, we had to promise that they'd see the mascot Sharky before or after the game. They had no other interest in going to the game, which is kind of cute.
And it's still basically the same now.
That's right.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, it's got to be so unique. Just even growing up in that atmosphere, I can only imagine of like, kids just don't seem to have this as much of a grasp on like fame and these types of things of like what it truly is, and like, you know, dad's on TV and like watching them play and stuff like that. I can only imagine. So it's got to be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, like my sisters and I were never really into hockey, so we didn't really see him as a celebrity. We like to keep him humble.
And they do a great job of that.
We also feel really lucky that for the most part, lots of people who know who my dad is like him. So we haven't had to deal with a lot of like negative backlash, people saying mean things about him to us. So, I mean, we're lucky that he's for the most part, a well-liked guy, I think.
On occasion.
Yeah. Well, I can say in my short experience so far, knowing you, Kelly, that you've been nothing but gracious and welcoming. So I appreciate that.
I appreciate that too, Kyle. And for that, I take no credit for. I was very lucky. I had two incredible parents, my mom and dad, Steve and Pauline, and a great brother, Ken. And so I think when you're guided in that direction, that I think you learn properly, and that it's no big deal, whatever you do.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm really excited about this conversation. It's a conversation that is really near and dear to me as well. I'm somebody who also has 3 kids, and so really interested to kind of dive into the mental health side of just like families. But before we do that, I want to give the floor to Kaitlin to tell us just a little bit more about More Good Days right out of the gate here. Can you tell us a little bit more about More Good Days and about the name and the significance behind the name as well?
Yeah, so my husband Hayden and I started the company just about 2 years ago, and it really stemmed from a Christmas gift that mostly my husband made for our families. And he's an artist, so he drew a graphic for a garden, which is a really like a safe place in my head that I like to go to when I'm feeling anxious. So he made his own design of a garden. And a lot of times when I have been doing different speaking engagements or speaking about my experience, I often say I started to have more good days than bad in my journey. And that kind of stuck with my husband. And he thought that more good days would be a great saying on a shirt. So we got our
I love it. That's the one I want. You're wearing the one I want. So
And it's so comfortable, Kyle. Sorry for interrupting.
all good. So we ended up making those shirts for just our immediate families for Christmas. And my dad was wearing it during a Twitter post, I think.
Yeah.
And there were lots of people interested in the shirt and really related well to what it was all about. And from there, we decided to start the company. And it's been really cool for us to be able to feel like we're giving back to the community, because we do donate 10% of sales. And like you mentioned, we have donated to Canadian Suicide Prevention Services already. And we're not like locked into them. So we're looking to see if we can donate to different charities in the future. But it's been a journey. And I think our main goal when we started the company, and we really try and focus on that now, is just helping end the stigma against mental illness and spreading positivity as well. Because even if you see my dad's hoodie, for example, says more good days, and you have no idea what the company is about or mental illness or anything, I mean, I think everyone can relate to wanting more good days. Yeah. And I think that that's a good representation of what our goal is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fantastic. I love it. And like you said, the name in itself just it just brings positive thoughts to you, right? And so kudos to that. That's really cool. The story about how it started out as just like a gift, right? And then you guys kind of just let it develop into what it became, which we were kind of talking briefly about before we went on air here. You mentioned the journey. I want to get into the journey a little bit if we can, about kind of what led to this, right? You've had mental health struggles from a young age. Can you tell us just a little bit about maybe what you went through and what led to you actually having to discover more good days and work towards more good days?
So I'm 29 right now, and I was diagnosed with anxiety and OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, when I was 12. So it first started in the summer before grade 7, and I was getting all these thoughts in my head about me getting certain diseases or dying. And, you know, anybody who has dealt with their own mental illness, I'm sure they know the feeling of feeling like you can control it at first, you know, just kind of ignore it. And then it gets really loud and it gets really strong, and I couldn't control it. I couldn't get rid of those thoughts on my own. And I was doing things that my parents noticed that was out of character. I was making up a ton of excuses to not do anything, whether it was hang out with my friends, a sleepover. I loved to dance, and I would make up excuses not to go to dance class and school and all things like that. And I think at that point they realized that, you know, this is something bigger than us. And I started seeing a psychologist, and from there it just was a journey, and it still is. I've definitely had lots of ups and lots of downs. And when I reached high school is actually the first time I told my parents I'm having more good days than bad, which was just like such an incredible feeling. And I think when I'm struggling, I like to think back to those days and just be like, I can get there again, and having hope that like I'll get that feeling back. And right now I'm having more good days than bad, which is good. And I'm just trying to enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah. I love that. And it resonates well with something. I'm working with people in fitness, nutrition, and life coaching and that type of thing. And a big thing that I talk about is consistency over perfection. And it kind of seems like those two things are very aligned with our two messages of like, it's not about never having a bad day. It's just about trying to work towards, you know, having more good than bad. And if you can do that, then you're winning, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, because there's no such thing as perfection. So and I think at times we're all a little bit guilty of trying to chase it, and that's a bad thing to chase, because it's just not realistic. Yeah.
Kelly, I'm going to turn things over to you for a second. Now, a lot of people would probably say that, being a goalie is probably one of the more terrifying, or dare I say crazy, positions to take, which is you're standing in front of 100-mile-an-hour shots, and especially with the pads that you were wearing when you were doing it, like it's a scary thing. But I think something that's more scary than that, and any parent would probably agree, is learning that your child is struggling with their mental health, or depression, or addiction, or any of those things. It's a terrifying thing for a parent to have to hear or discover. Can you tell us a little bit about just when you first learned about this, similar to what Kaitlin was touching on there?
Okay, so we knew something was going on leading up to when Kaitlin first started going to see her psychologist, Dr. Kelly Miraz, here in the city. But we didn't know exactly what it was. We didn't know that trouble was lurking. We didn't know to look for signs. We recognized there were plenty of signs. We didn't understand. We all thought, or my wife and I thought, they're like quirky little habits, but we didn't put them all together. And many years later, I was to discover, we worked with a major bank about this this thing they had going on, know the signs. And then I think they had come up with 5 or something, right, Kate?
I think so.
And so the night before Kate was going to share her story publicly in 2013 in the spring, my wife and I was on the road somewhere. My wife and I were having this conversation about what were the signs, and we tried to put it all together. I think we counted 12 or 13 different signs with Kaitlin. And so, looking back, I'm not guilty. I just don't feel guilty, because I didn't know, that I was supposed to be looking out for something. I didn't know what mental health or mental illness was. I just didn't know. And so once Kate started to get the help she needed, then I think that's when it really clicked into Donna and I that, okay, this is what this looks like. And this is not something that will pass for Kaitlin at that time anyways, in a month or so. This was going to be something that Kaitlin would have to work on really hard for a while. And that continues to this day. And we've been there to support her. And we've learned so much also, like, when Kaitlin, especially for the first few years, when she'd go see Dr. Miraz, we would come in also with her for the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes, sometimes, maybe a little bit longer on occasion. And he would fill us in about what's going on and what sort of therapies she might be learning, and all these different things that made us aware of her therapy, how to support her in that. And it's not something that you learn very quickly either. There's no little pamphlet or textbook that comes and you read 20 things and all of a sudden, oh, okay, if I follow these 20 steps, Kaitlin's going to be just fine. So it wasn't like that. It's still a work in progress. And I've learned so much about it, not only about Kaitlin's mental wellness, but mine also. And I followed her path in a sense, and her strength. That's something that I've always admired, that when we watched her fight for so long, for so many years, that I just admired her strength, because it would be very hard for some people to continue on.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. No, that's beautiful, you guys. And I admire it as well, right? And I'm sure, Kaitlin, you admire the people that you run into, even with your speaking engagements and those types of things. And I think that's something that's so important. That's really what excited me about having this conversation as well, is, especially health-related anxieties in today's world right now. Like, everybody seems to be getting sick right now, right? And these health-related anxieties are such a common thing, but to the individual who's feeling it, it doesn't feel common. You feel like you're losing your mind. You feel like almost ashamed of it at the time, of like, I shouldn't feel this scared about this small thing, and all those different thoughts that go through our mind. And to hear people like you who are coming out and speaking about it, and to have conversations like this, I think it brings that strength for everybody and makes us all stronger.
to your point about, yes, I totally agree with all that about these times. It's very frightening for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, health-wise, financial, all these different things that we've experienced since the start of the pandemic. But the one thing that really put it in perspective for us kind of early on in the pandemic, my wife, Donna, and I were terrified for Kaitlin, wondering, because she was always so worried about illness and so on. We thought those thoughts would come roaring back. And do you remember what you said to us?
This is just my life.
Like, you've been living in a pandemic.
Being scared of a disease, or having it always on your mind and everywhere. Like, yeah, that's my life. So it was interesting. Yeah.
And that sort of eased our fears, because we're like, oh my gosh, what's this going to look like for the next while for Kaitlin? And she was like, yeah, I've been living in a pandemic forever, so I think I can handle this one.
Like, I've been preparing for this my entire life.
Exactly.
Showtime.
But also, like, to that point as well, like, how incredible that you can take your struggles before the pandemic and now lift other people up, while we're going through a pandemic and now coming out of one, right? Hopefully. You can now be such an asset for other people and really help support other people who are experiencing things that you've experienced as well. That's really, really cool. Yeah. I'm really curious, just in the early years and then now even into the latter years of the present day, how important communication has been to the both of you in terms of understanding the mental health side of things and just navigating the journey, because there's ups and downs and peaks and valleys and twists and turns. How important has communication been through this time?
Very important.
Mm-hmm.
I think especially since when I was first diagnosed, like I said, I was 12. So I was still learning how to control my emotions and how to communicate those things as well. And it was hard for me to be able to talk to my parents about it, because I didn't necessarily know how to articulate how I was feeling. And because I was struggling so much, a lot of anger came out. And I also, looking back, I know how everything that my parents did back then was to help me get better, and that there were lots of things that they didn't want to do or make me do in order to get better, but they did. And of course, I'm so grateful that they did that. But back then, when I was 12 and they're making me go to school and dance and all those things, I really was angry at them for it, because I didn't want to do those things. I just wanted to stay at home and be with them. And so I think now that I'm older, hopefully I have better communication with how I'm doing. And I don't have that anger towards them, or even like my husband, I've been with him for 7 years now, and he knows me very well, and he knows when to push me to face my anxieties. And I think that it's just important to have that open communication with telling them too how I'm doing, and if I am struggling or if I'm going through something, just to be able to tell them and they can be there for me.
And then I think of communication in different ways also, like when Kaitlin, when we started to understand a little bit more about it, and we had to do, when Kaitlin was feeling really anxious, we would have to do breathing exercises, which I'm sure a lot of people out there are familiar with if you've had a person with mental illness. And I think breathing is just good for anybody when they're feeling a little bit stressed. Anyways, we would have these breathing exercises that might last 2 to 3 hours, sometimes a little bit longer if Kate was really in a desperate place. And the communication right off the get-go is so important, because I'd ask her, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst, what's your level? And oftentimes it was like a 9 or a 10. And then over the course of time, we'd have all these exercises, the breathing, and then we'd try and get to that garden she talked about that Hayden drew for the first More Good Days clothing. And that was a really special journey to be on together. And she would, over the course of time, I'd ask her, what level are you? And hopefully in an hour, she might be at an 8. And over the course of the next couple hours, we can maybe get her down to about a 4 or 5 or 3. I don't think you were ever at a 1 or anything.
I don't think I ever am.
But that's the understanding of the communication, right? And so our goal was to get her at a place that was manageable for her. And that was I always said that was at the time I didn't like going through it, and I didn't like seeing you like that, but it was a cool journey for us to go on together. And Donna, of course, did it as well a lot, but for whatever reason, Kate and I did it a lot. Even if I was on the road, I'd spend 4 hours on the phone with her at a time and just try and help her.
Yeah, that was really nice. Both of my parents have been incredibly supportive and helpful with me throughout, but that's something that I feel like we really shared, was going to the garden. And like he said, I would call him at like whatever time it was, and he would just talk to me on the phone for however many hours it took, and I never felt like he wasn't there supporting me with that. So that's really special.
It sounds a lot like, I imagine during that time it didn't feel super like special and heartwarming, but now looking back at it, it really is this kind of special thing, even like a bond that you guys were able to share during that time. Yeah,
it was good too. Also, like we shared a lot with Kaitlin's 2 sisters to make sure, because to a certain degree, when we're really focusing a lot on Kate at times, that I never really asked them, but I would think that they probably felt a little left out, that maybe sometime if you're looking at spending equal time, that most likely wasn't the case to a certain degree, but that was part of it. But we shared a lot with what Caitlin's going through, so they understood why Kate was getting maybe a little bit more time with us, and they were terrific also. But that's not part of that communication. And also Donna and I would share, with each other about what Kate's going through, the magnitude of it, maybe the severity, all the differences, and just to remind ourselves not to ever be mad at Kaitlin, because she didn't want to be in that situation, right? And so I'm not afraid to share. Donna was mad at her one time, and I helped Donna sort of with some guidance about why don't be mad at her. She's trying her best. And one time I was mad at Kate, and Donna did the exact same thing with me.
And I'm pretty sure I know what that time was that you were mad at me.
Do you want to share?
When I left Kelowna.
There you go.
Yeah. So I tried to go to university in Kelowna, and I was there for about a month, and I wasn't ready for it. And I mean, understandably, that would be frustrating as a parent. And on the drive home, I think, because I took my car home, and Dad came out and helped me pack up my stuff and everything. And understandably, he was upset, but I didn't find out that you were upset until years later.
Yeah, years later, like, we didn't share that.
They never told me ever that they were
feeling it like was that. A good thing that, we were driving in the mountains. We were leaving Kelowna, and by the time we had to spend the night in Revelstoke because we'd left late. And by the time that we're already in Revelstoke, which isn't a far drive, and Donna had totally convinced me of the right things that I should have been thinking about. You can be mad at the disease or whatever you want to call it, but not at the person, because the person doesn't want to be going through that, right? So it's easy to feel frustrated or some anger towards the disease itself, mental illness, but not at the person. Don't direct that at the person. They're already having a difficult time.
Yeah, and it's hard enough for somebody to open up and communicate as it is when they're already feeling, like we already mentioned, like you're maybe feeling a little bit ashamed about the way that you've about these thoughts that you're having, these feelings that you're having and stuff. And then when you have extra external negative emotions that are coming into it, it makes it even more difficult, right? And so it sounds like just that ability to communicate with each other really opened the door to, allowing yourselves not to be as angry and, to really keep those emotions at bay almost.
I kind of want to go back to when Kaitlin was first getting the extensive therapy, and then when she started to have more good days with your school and with dance. You traveled, right?
Yeah.
And that was, oh boy, for parents out there that have boys or girls that are going through something like this, and then might have to travel with their dance team or their sports team or something. We were afraid. Like the first place, where'd you go? London, England?
That was the well, I went to Alaska first.
Alaska.
Oh, wow.
First.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And so Donna and I seriously had this conversation that maybe one of us, we won't tell Kaitlin, maybe one of us will fly up to Alaska and stay in a hotel. She wouldn't even know. And hopefully if her trip goes great, she'll just come home and it'll be great. But she was having such a good time. We couldn't barely get a hold of her because she had forgotten to text us or call us because things are going great, which as a parent, that's what you want to hear. And also we had the same conversation when she went to London, England. We're like, oh boy, that's a long way if something really is troubling her. And again, she had the greatest time, and it made us feel so good that she's, even under these situations, she was just doing so well at times. It was really beautiful. Right?
Yeah.
So honest answer only, was the argument who gets to go to Alaska or who has to go to Alaska?
Okay, Alaska was actually amazing. I loved going there, and it's like, I love the mountains and, just like that like Banff kind of feeling.
Right.
Which actually I think helped me a lot because it did feel kind of like home. But I mean, Alaska's amazing.
Right. And I could have gone to a pub in London, England. I think that would have worked for me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I have to.
Oh, that's funny. I'm curious, as you touched on kind of the marriage side of things, the parenting side of things as well, Kelly. What kind of impact does this type of journey and struggle have on a relationship as well, between parents?
Okay, for us, it brought us, Donna and I think are just terrific together, but it brought us even closer because in a sense, it forced us to have conversations that we didn't know we were going to have about our children and life and sort of navigating when life isn't going in the sort of direction you had hoped. And so that was kind of good. That was a really good feeling, knowing that we were sticking together. We weren't pulling apart as a couple, and we're on this path with Kate together, and that whatever twists and turns were in front of us, we were able to navigate together. It was kind of cool to have some of those conversations. They're difficult. Some of them were really difficult, but I think it was great.
And you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but can you think of a specific example of a time when you guys really felt like where the situation was making you feel closer together versus like it being a struggle or something you had to work through?
Yep. When we thought Kate was doing better, and those were kind of like the rewards we were looking for, like when she was able to travel, like when she was able to go back to school. Because what Kate didn't say at the beginning, when it was the first day of grade 7, when she couldn't get out of the car at school, literally could not get out of the car. And so then when she started to go back into the classroom after having met a number of times with Dr. Mraz, I think he missed about 3 weeks of school or something.
Something like that.
And then so, her journey back into school wasn't just going into a classroom and fitting right back in. The first couple of weeks or 3 weeks, just sitting in the principal's office and
for like an hour.
Yeah.
Not even for a full day.
Right.
Yeah.
And not even going to class. And so when you start to see progress like that, and then able to go for a morning and participate in a classroom, the same thing, dance, we'd drop her off. She couldn't go to dance for a while. And then when she started again with all the therapy, she was able to go back to her dance classes, but she didn't participate. She just sat in there and watched. So when you get rewards like that, that's kind of where, you have those conversations of, okay, I think we're doing the right thing here. This therapy is helping, because you don't get an overnight, something overnight where there's a big win. That's just not how it works.
Yeah.
It seems like there's no progress until you start to get some tiny little victories.
Yeah.
And
I love sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I really put them through a lot too, like not even just the anxiety and OCD and everything, but I was very angry, and I told them that I was very angry. And I think that, I'm guessing it helped you guys knowing that you're both in it together, and like you could help rationalize it maybe, because
we knew what the anger, where it was coming from. We knew that you didn't really hate us or whatever you were telling us. That's just, as my lawyer, he and his wife are amazing also. And Carol, that's her field, right? So she has a PhD.
I think so.
Yeah. And so she sort of helped us also with, what Kaitlin's going through and all that. And so I understood that the anger wasn't really her. It was just the desperation of the mental illness.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned this, like the small wins, because I think that's something that's so overlooked, and it's really hard to see that, probably especially for you, Kaitlin, when you're going through that, especially as a younger person, to like see these small wins, let alone celebrate them. But you're right, like whether it's somebody who's working towards a fitness goal, or whether it's somebody who's trying to improve their mental health, whatever it is in their life, those small wins are so important. And Kelly, credit to what you said, like actually celebrating them with your wife, that just, it helps so much to not only recognize it, but then go like, hey, parenting win, we're making progress here. Like that's
a good way to put it. Was a parenting win, because you're always looking for signs, but if you don't see them, I suppose you could get frustrated, or maybe we're not doing the right thing here if you don't see progress quick enough, or whatever you think, however quick you think you should be seeing a difference.
Yeah. And Kaitlin, what are some of the small wins that you look for even today?
So, I mean, it changes all the time, but I think something for me is being able to go out and do things on my own. I tend to get attached to people. So it was my mom and my dad, and I think that it's important for me to be able to go out and do things on my own and just really fight through those feelings. And I think also just being grateful for everything helps me stay focused, and taking my medication every day. That's another thing. And, I think it's just taking it day by day and not focusing on the big picture. And I've been able to do things that, like now, that when I was younger, I never thought I'd be able to do. And, like those trips, for example, that my dad was talking about, I never thought I'd be able to actually do that, let alone enjoy myself doing it. Or, when I moved out of my parents' house, that was a huge thing. And I never thought I'd be able to leave my parents' house and just go to school and get a job and all those things, where it might not be a big deal to some people, but to me it was a huge accomplishment. So I just need to like focus on all of those major steps and all those little things that I did to be able to get there too.
Yeah, and I love that you said that too. It's just like also looking back and recognizing the progress that you've made and where you are now today. Like that could be a daily win that everybody can look at in their own lives, right?
Yeah, and even, I mean, I'm sure lots of people have felt that, just getting out of bed on some days, and that's the goal, and that's sometimes where you're at. But you just have to be proud that you did it, and that you are really trying your best, and you're working hard towards the goals.
And continuing to work.
Sorry, if you have a bad day or a failure, that's okay too. You might have those, and so don't beat yourself up.
There's always tomorrow.
Yep.
It's just about having more good days than bad days, right?
There you go. Right.
That's awesome. Kelly, question for you. I'm curious, as mental health is something that's now just, it's still growing and it's still coming more to the forefront. Whereas, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it wasn't something that we talked about much. It wasn't something that people were spending time recognizing. I'm curious if your journey with having kids and dealing with the experiences that Kaitlin was going through as well, how did that change your thoughts on mental health, and did it bring up even like past or present awareness to your own mental health?
Yes, to answer your last question, yes, it did. Then it sort of had me reflect upon my playing days, and I was writing a book in the spring and summer of 2017, and Kirsty McClellan Day is the co-author, and she and I would get together, whether at her office or at her house. And I remember we're getting really close to finishing up, and I'd been really honest in the book about a bunch of things, and I was getting ready to leave her house one day, and I was going to meet Kaitlin and Donna at the Earls in West Hills for dinner. And I thought, you know what? I better be really honest here. If Kaitlin can be so strong and share her story about mental health, I better really fess up here. And this, I believe, was maybe the last chapter that we wrote. And I talked about my really struggling in 92, 93 with the LA Kings, because when I went through it, I knew, of course, I knew I was struggling, but I didn't know it was related to mental health. As you mentioned, nobody was talking about it, and certainly men in the NHL were not talking about it. And so I shared with Kirsty what I went through in 92, 93. Now, looking back, it was clear that I had rational thoughts, and those were okay going into that year. In the summer, I was like, well, I wonder how many more years I can keep doing this. Donna was pregnant with Kaitlin. I felt a lot of pressure. I felt some stress about how much longer I can keep playing and making money and all that kind of stuff. And I was able to sort of hold those thoughts off until around October, November, when the thoughts grew louder, and Kate years later was able to teach me about the loop. And I had this loop going round and round and round. And that loop, those weren't the rational questions anymore. They were irrational thoughts about, you're done, you're lousy, you can't keep playing this way. The average career is 3 years. You're already in your 10th year. Your expiry date is soon to happen, and all these things. And then the voices were just too loud. And luckily for me, and then I was terrible. I went in a ditch pretty quickly after that. Luckily for me, my coach, Barry Melrose, at the time recognized I needed help. And I mean, honestly, in 93, nobody was reaching out to other people and getting them the help. So he was able to put me in contact and work one-on-one with a guy by the name of Tony Robbins. And so that was my lifeline. And it was amazing how quickly I was able to find my way again, because I knew I was a good goalie. I just mentally, I couldn't do it. And so I was able to get through it. And then, so I shared that in the book, and it was really, I found really cool to get that out there and not be ashamed of it. And, I thought that was maybe the best chapter in the book because of that realness that Kaitlin taught us.
Yeah. I've always said nothing in my, like, I own a business. I play sports as well. I'm in martial arts, but nothing in my life has taught me more about myself than my kids. Like, I'm continually learning something new about myself every single day based off of them. Right. And so very, very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And we're the same way. We're lucky. We have some really cool conversations around the dinner table. We get together most Sundays, and we have some really great conversations about wide-ranging topics and so on. And it's been great for Don and I to hear their perspective and their husbands and everything. So it's phenomenal.
Yeah. What would be like one big takeaway? You mentioned working with Tony Robbins, which is pretty fascinating. What would be one big takeaway from that experience that you maybe still hold with you today?
Oh, that's easy. An index card, a laminated index card I was carrying around for the 5 years after I started working with Tony Robbins, and I'd look at it at the start of every game and in the intermission before the start of every period. I'd look at this laminated index card, and I had 4 points on it that were important for my mental health. And it gave me strength when I went out onto the ice. And I think because of working with Tony and that really cool idea, I carry an index card with me again now, because I've been going through some stuff, and it's amazing. I look at it every once in a while, and I have shared this every once in a while on a Saturday night. If I know that I'm not as confident as I need to be, or something's going on, I'll put that little index card right on the desk. Now, people at home can't see it, but there's a little shelf just under the glass table, and I put it right there, and it gives me so much comfort or strength, or whatever words I'm looking for, but it gives me something that I need, something tangible that I can actually see. And I know people have said, why don't you just put it on your phone? I like where I can actually grab the card and look at it and hold it, and I know it's in my wallet, that for those days I need it.
Yeah. Awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love the teamwork that you guys have, and you can see it just looking at you guys right now, and anybody who's watching this episode right now, they can see it too. Is you can just see this unity, this love between the two of you, and I think that's something that's just so special. But I'm gonna disrupt it just a little bit here for a second. So Kaitlin, I'm curious, thinking back to your experience and your continued experience with dealing with mental health issues, what is something that, for the parents listening out there, like what's something that parents can do a better job of?
So from my experience, when I think back of how my parents dealt with it, the things that I remember are them doing things that they didn't want to do, really pushing me to do what I need to do. And I imagine, I don't have kids, but I imagine if your kids are begging you to not do something or do something and know that you can't, that would be very hard. So I think just sticking with what you know is right to do is awesome. And also just always showing that they love you. And I think, again, I'm not a parent, but I can assume that it would be hard to not be able to fix the situation. And, me as the person going through the mental health struggles, it's me who needs to put in the work and ultimately do the things that are going to make me better. So I think it would be hard as a parent to not be able to do that. And them just showing their love and support. And eventually, as I got older, I'm not looking at them for answers or to fix the situation. It's just for them to be there for me and just show the love. And I think that really goes a long way.
Yeah. And that you kind of answered another question that I had in the barrel there waiting, which is, when you do you think about one day when you maybe have children and how this journey will impact your parenting?
Yes, I think as someone who, has struggled most of my life with mental illness, I can, maybe overthink things a little bit, but I think that when I think of what I want to be like as a mom, it's what my parents were to me. And it's just having that love and the support and the not having judgment there either. I mentioned, us talking about our communication and everything, I never felt embarrassed or shameful sharing my thoughts with them. They never made me feel less than or anything like that. So just having the support and positivity and just being able to have those kind of hard conversations too is really important.
It is interesting too, Kyle, how you get to understand each other a little bit more. We were watching the news together a few years ago now, and there's an E. coli outbreak at a dairy farm in British Columbia. And knowing Kaitlin and knowing what her fears of disease and dying are like, and Don and I are watching the news story, and that was terrible. But I remember looking over at Kaitlin, and she looks right at me, and I'm like, and she's like, she thought somehow that she
It's like, I've got it. I have E. coli.
right.
And never had any of the cheese that was tainted,
No.
but I just know it. I have it.
Right.
And I think, yeah, I mean, we get through a lot of stuff by using humor.
Right.
That's kind of sometimes just a coping mechanism, but you know, I think that for us it works to make light of the situation sometimes.
If possible.
Yes. My own experience with the situation, not the actual
That's right.
tragedy or, you know, issue that's happening.
Yeah, of course. No, I think there's a lot of power in humor, right? There's a lot of power in, you know, even being able to laugh and chuckle about it. Maybe not in the moment, but even to look back now and go, you know, that was
when she tells me she's on at a 9 on a scale of 10, that's not the time to be
jokes. Then
we're not having the time of our lives at that point.
Yeah. You know, I love that you guys even communicate in that way of like using the scales and communicating the numbers and stuff like that, because I think that's something that is really overlooked also, in whether somebody's dealing with their own personal thing or whether they're, you know, working with somebody in support or, you know, with their spouse or their significant other. It's like being able to actually utilize the tools that you're given. Like, you can go to therapy, you can have the conversation, you can do coaching, whatever, and this will resonate really well with sports as well, right? You can get all the coaching, but unless you go and like you put it to practice. Can you speak to the importance of that on your journey, Kaitlin, on just like actually putting things into practice and the impact that that's had compared to maybe if you just went to therapy and had the conversations? Yeah,
so I think especially when I first started going to therapy, grade 7, I mean, it was a whole different world that I had no idea really existed. The idea of mental illness or therapy. So once, you know, my psychologist was giving me tools and different ways to use those tools in different situations, it's kind of like you get to a point where you figure out that if you don't use those tools, you're not getting better. So it's kind of something that you realize you just have to do, and using those breathing techniques or the rationalizations and just making those something that you start to automatically do. And it kind of just is a response after a while, you know, you do it without even thinking about it sometimes. And sometimes you really have to remind yourself to do them. And I think having people around you that can remind you to start doing those different techniques is also really important. And like my dad mentioned earlier, it's not something that just you do one thing and you're better and you're feeling great. It's a reminder that, you know, you have to keep up with it, and it might not feel like it's working, or it might not get the response that you want right away, but just to keep doing it. And, you know, as I've gotten older, I've learned different tools, and, you know, it's just important to always be focused on getting better and acknowledging that sometimes things don't work for you, or, you know, you need to work harder sometimes, or that kind of thing. It's just really all about trying your best and using what you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like you're saying like there's no one strategy that's going to work forever, or there's no one tool that's going to solve this. It's continuing to have mindfulness and awareness and utilizing the support that's around you.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I still go to therapy. I still see Kelly. I think I'm the oldest client he has, since he's a child psychologist, but that's okay. And, you know, he's always teaching me new things or reminding me of old tools or resources that I would do when I was younger, and they still work for me sometimes. And, other times you have to change it up a bit.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to also report, Kyle, that I see somebody on a regular basis. So it's 2 years now, actually. Oh, just over 2 years that I've been seeing somebody. And I don't go on a regular basis now, but he's in the same industry as I'm. So I see him often still. And so we have some chats about what's going on and how I'm feeling. And I happen to be doing well right now, although I've had a couple stretches here in this hockey season where it's been harder. And I understand why. Like, I really do sort of understand my brain now. But for a while, 2 years ago, I was going every Friday for months to see this person. It helped me immensely. Yeah, it was the best step I have ever taken.
Yeah, and thank you both for sharing that. That's and being open to that. I think I agree. I think that's just having a therapeutic relationship, no matter what it is. It doesn't, not for everybody. It doesn't have to be a therapist. Maybe it's a coach. Maybe it's, maybe it's even a friend, if that's all that you have access to. But developing some type of therapeutic relationship that benefits you, yeah, it's huge, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll finish with a bit of more of a fun question. This one I'll throw to Kelly. I'm just curious with goaltending in specific. I imagine that there's a calming of the mind that you have to reach when you're in the middle of the game. You're trying to follow the puck, constantly scanning for it. I imagine, like, when I think about that, if I put myself in those skates, I imagine myself just like heart rate pounding, like constantly like trying to like see and race for the puck. Was that a good mental practice for you? Is that something that you recognize now as like a tool that you were able to, maybe you didn't recognize that you were doing it, but was there a calming of the mind exercise there that was kind of hidden in that sport?
Wow, that's really perceptive of you. And you're right. It's, playing any sport is hard, and certain positions are harder than others. And playing goal is extremely difficult. And it's the hardest thing is about the mental game, right? So I'll just walk you briefly through how my mind worked to get through a game. So the buildup was, depending on how busy our schedule was, my buildup would start the night before a game. I'd start thinking about the opponent and, who the stars are on that team, what their power play may look like, and all these different things. And then I'd go to the morning skate. And then I'd start to really internalize and get maybe a little bit quieter and just really start to focus about my job that night. And I would have a nap, which was very calming. More calming than restful, I'd say, because I was just really trying to get into a happy place, kind of like a peaceful place. And then, but the buildup, it's still there. You can't deny it. And so you get butterflies. And so the time for me, the most agonizing time for me was after warm up and before puck drop. So we'd come back into the dressing room for about 10 minutes, whatever that time is, 12 minutes. And then we'd go back out onto the ice for the national anthems and puck drop. That was, my gut was really going at that point. And usually for me, every game was a little bit different, but about 3 or 4 minutes of game time, then my stomach would settle in. And I liked that feeling. That was a really nervous anticipation that I really liked. And I get for nothing else. I've never had it for anything else in my life. But then after that, then it becomes a really cool game you're playing with your mind. But the biggest thing you have to do for me is convince yourself that you can play well for an extended amount of time. And I was convinced I couldn't play a great game for 60 minutes or 65 if there's overtime, but I could play great for 5 minutes. So I broke every game, every period into 5-minute segments. And if I scored on, then I just wipe the slate clean and play great for 5 more minutes. It was a manageable way to get through a game. And then lastly, the thing you have to do, and I kind of touched on it, you have to, as soon as a goal is scored on you, let it go. It's done. Don't worry about it. Doesn't matter how bad that goal was. Just look forward to making the next save. One save. I never look forward to making or the challenge of making the next 20 saves. One save. I just needed to build off one. And then you build off that, and then you make all of a sudden you've made 7 saves, and then you made 20, and it's just a total mind game. I love that question. Thanks for bringing that up.
Of course. And I think it's so fascinating, the ability to, you get scored on, because we've seen it so many times where whether it's a goalie or a quarterback or whatever the case might be, but in sports, it's like one play goes bad, and then it's like another play goes bad, and it's like you can just see it even through the TV screen of this person unraveling. And it's so fascinating to be able to have that ability to just wipe the slate clean, like you said, and just say, okay, fresh start. Yeah.
Don't worry, I've unraveled too.
And Kaitlin, do you, taking that out of the hockey world, I'm curious, do you relate to that as well, of like just having to like, okay, I had a bad day, I'm going to wipe the slate clean and let's try and make today a good day?
Definitely. And my dad has taught me a lot about that too. And he has, since a very long time, he's mentioned that about him when he was playing, and he only needed to focus on the next 5 minutes or those small goals, because I would need to do that too, whether it was going to school or on a trip. If you think about the big picture, it can be very scary and overwhelming. But if you just focus on, okay, just need to go get through the next minute and then move up to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, that kind of thing. So I've really learned a lot from that. And also about not focusing on the negative things that maybe you couldn't do one day, or those letting the goals in or whatever. I don't know. I've never had to deal with that, but it's hard to not focus on that and start to unravel, because it's really easy to pick up on all the negative things or the things that you feel like you couldn't do or didn't do. And it's nice to just think, okay, tomorrow is a new day and I get to try again and see how it goes.
Yeah. One more question just on that topic, because, and this is a selfish question for me, because I coach students in martial arts and particularly in fighting. And I've seen students that struggle with this, and I've struggled with this myself before too, where maybe it's one particular opponent that you've seen time and time again, but it's like it gets in your head and you're like, man, or maybe it's like this, oh, that player always scores on me. They always seem to have my number. Is there any advice that you can give to somebody? And again, this relates to real life as well. Maybe it's a bad day, but is there any advice that either one of you can give for how you can actually just start to get better at wiping that slate clean and just going like, okay, I'm going to forget about that. I'm going to move forwards?
Well, for me, I would think that you're stronger than you know, and you have to believe in yourself, and don't give into those negative feelings or those thoughts. Or in my case, when I was a player, particular guys, or I didn't necessarily have that. I had a couple teams that, I had a real struggle with. And so I had to really fight hard in those games to not let those thoughts become bigger than they should have been, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Before we wrap up here, I want to be respectful of your time. The time we're recording right now, we're close to the holidays, so I want to make sure I'm respectful of your guys' time. But I also want to make sure that we don't leave anything unsaid. So I'll throw it to Kaitlin. Anything that we haven't said yet, and then to follow up with that, just where can people find more about More Good Days and get some of those amazing hoodies that you guys are wearing?
So I think something that my dad and I always try and focus on whenever we are talking about mental health is just don't give up, because you can do it. And if I can do it, if my dad can do it, we know that everyone has it in them to be a fighter and to get through it. And just find what works for you. We mentioned multiple times before on different podcasts or speaking engagements that just because it works for us to share publicly our situation and our story doesn't mean that that's what everybody has to do. Whether it's, like if you are able to and it works for you to share with a lot of people what you're going through, that's great. If it's just a small group of people or your family, that's great too. You just have to do what is best for you, and just know that you're stronger than you think, and you'll prove yourself more than you think as well. So just keep fighting, and it does get better. And in terms of More Good Days, we have a website, moregooddaysclothing.com, and we have an Instagram, More Good Days Clothing Limited. And you can find all our products online. We have hoodies and t-shirts and toques and all that. And we just really appreciate any sort of support, whether it's a follow on Instagram means just as much to us as a purchase. And we just want to help spread that positivity. So, and
just one final thing about More Good Days, it's my go-to when I travel to Toronto every weekend and home. So every Friday you'll see me in something with More Good Days, and also coming home on Sunday. And it's a great conversation starter. So many passengers that see the shirt, they've asked me about it. And in particular, I've had a lot of flight attendants asking me about it and the message. So I share the story about Hayden and Kaitlin and the genesis of the clothing line, and the profound statement, More Good Days. And it's really cool. I'm proud to be her father and supporting the product.
Oh, I mean, you can see that for sure. Like I said, I could sit here and watch you guys all day, because I can just see the love between you guys. I can see the support. It truly is amazing. We'll include all that information in the show notes as well. So if anybody is interested, we'll make it really easy. Hit the show notes and go and check out, because you guys have lots of cool stuff too. The toques I love. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff on there. So please go check it out. And I know you guys donate on 10% of the proceeds, I believe, go to mental health organizations. So that's fantastic. I want to say thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you guys coming on, and so close to the holidays as well. It's been a real pleasure. So thank you.
You did a great job, Kyle. Thank you. This was fun. Kate and I, we could have, unfortunately, we're going for dinner, but otherwise we could have shared another couple hours with you. So keep up the great work, Kyle. Yeah, thanks for having us. Thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks everybody for listening or watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. For additional support or to work with one of us one-on-one, go to our website, www.wellnessdojo.ca. You can also find us on Instagram at wellnessdojoyyc, or on all other social media platforms searching The Wellness Dojo. We'll see you in the next episode.